Welcome to the Strength Coach Experience podcast. I'm your host, Joe Lego. And here we go. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Strength Coach Experience, episode 20. Today, I want to welcome Ryan Fair. He is the performance coordinator with the Cleveland Indians. I had the pleasure of working with Ryan back when I was with the Mets in my last season in 2017. Ryan, I appreciate you being on, man, and I'm psyched to have you here and kind of catch up a little bit as we go through this.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me, Joe, and stoked to see you again, man, and doing well. I'm really excited to be kind of in the earlier days of the podcast, and I've really enjoyed it so far.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate the ongoing support, man, and I'm happy to get going. So why don't we just go through a little bit of your background, kind of growing up and stuff like that, and kind of how you got involved in strength and conditioning and where you are today.
Yeah, definitely. So a little bit of an untraditional path, I would think, and I'll try to keep it relatively short. But long story, very, very short. Was in the game of baseball at the age of 4, and that's the only sport I ever played. I lived in Florida, so was that early specialization. Played baseball from 4 years old until 18. Realized very late in high school that the whole mindset of Division I or bust wasn't going to work for me, and so my prospects at the next level were pretty slim. So I knew probably like 16 or 17 that because I was a pretty short right-handed pitcher, didn't throw very hard. Like I knew that training was going to be important. So I started lifting weights and all that, kind of midway through high school. And I realized that I kind of loved the training side of performance more than actually competing on the mound. So when it got time to kind of graduating, I realized, hey, this might be a good time to just start my career and maybe not necessarily play junior college baseball or D2 or D3, and let's just go right into coaching. So I lucked out, and at my high school down in Central Florida, they brought in a new head coach, and our paths crossed when I happened to be at the school using the weight room after I graduated. I just kept kind of taking advantage of using the facilities, and he asked me if I'd be willing to come through BP, and really the rest is history. I never stopped coaching after that. I coached at DeLand High School for 4 years. But what I'll do is I'll go back.
Okay.
Yeah, so realized kind of halfway through high school that I enjoyed the training side of baseball more than actually competing on the mound. So when it got time to realizing, when I was 17 or 18, that I probably didn't have a whole lot of prospects to play at the next level, I decided I kind of wanted to go into strength and conditioning, and I lucked out with an opportunity where I ran into the new head baseball coach at DeLand High School. He offered me the opportunity to come out at 18 years old and throw batting practice to the freshman team. And really the rest is history for me. I haven't really stopped coaching ever since. And I coached at DeLand High School for 4 straight years while I was doing my undergrad, and just kind of learned who I was as a coach from 18 to 22. Got an opportunity to coach at Stetson University right when they started their strength and conditioning department. So all they had was the director, Brad Loki, and they had myself as a volunteer assistant. But I got to coach every single day because it was just 2 of us for all probably 20 sports. At my senior year at the University of Florida, got an opportunity to intern with the LA Dodgers, spent some time there. And then when it came time to graduate, the Dodgers had an opening and offered me an opportunity to come on full time. So spent a year with the LA Dodgers, came back to kind of the South Florida area because I was missing home, and had an opportunity that where we overlap with the New York Mets. And it was a short stint there because back at DeLand High School, they offered me the opportunity to be their first ever full-time strength coach. So jumped over to DeLand High, got that program running for about a year and a half. And that's when the Cleveland Indians called, and it kind of was out of nowhere. I was really content at DeLand High, back in my hometown, and really building things with the kids there. But had an opportunity I really just couldn't turn down with the Indians, and now I've been there ever since. And so we've just completed 4 years and going into year 5, and really enjoying it. So hopefully I've made that story as concise as possible for you.
Yeah, you did a good job of kind of collapsing it there. I think it's a good point you bring up. I talked about in the last podcast about how a lot of people that get into the coaching realm and the kind of area where we are when they play sports, because most of us, but not all, we start out as athletes. We enjoy that preparatory time a lot more than the competition. Not that the competition isn't fun, but I think early on, it seems like it's a common trait. You kind of figure out that the practice and the stuff you do in practice and on your own is more important or will help you more than what you actually, just in the batting cage or actually throwing in the games, So I think that's across the board something that comes up. So let's go through just a little bit your time spent in the early minor leagues. What are some of the things like you kind of picked up, and how did you kind of change as a coach, if you will, from when you first started at Delane High School to kind of where you are now?
Yeah, that's a really awesome question. I would say, like, boy, that's a good one. So let me start with what's the same, because I think it makes the part that's different so much easier. What's the same is I think I learned who I was as a person in those years too. Like that, it was just such a really influential period for me to become to start coaching. From 18 to 22, you're kind of learning who you are like as a person. You step outside of high school and where all your friends are and everything that and you kind of take on your adult life. So I learned what worked for me with younger athletes at that time and who I was going to be, and kind of went through those phases of like I thought I needed to be a rah-rah coach, or I thought I needed to be this really enthusiastic guy, or I got to be this authoritarian. And like, so we go through all those phases and figure out who you are. And by the time I came out of that, I felt really good about who I was as a person and as a coach. And I think that's been pretty consistent. But what's changed is pretty much everything. I would say when I first started coaching, I obviously didn't know what I was doing, but the pendulum swung back and forth between we're going to lift heavy weights, we're going to get strong, we're going to get bigger, faster. And then the pendulum swung to we're only going to do correctives. And I have a bunch of, like 14-year-olds rolling around on the floor and never touching a single external load. The pendulum swung back and forth that way. I would say now the biggest change in the last 4 years is going into more of just management. So I've gotten to coach over the last 4 years, and progressively I've kind of stepped away from the floor. I still on every single day am out with athletes, and I kind of never get away from programming from some athletes. But I spend a lot of time now coaching coaches, even if it's sometimes directly, indirectly. There's just a lot more of like management in working with people that I've had to learn, and things that when I was even just early in the minor leagues, like I wasn't in as many rooms as I am now. And I don't know if that's because of the role I was in or if that's because of the organizations I've been with. But I do know that the exposure to some of the things that I've had with the Indians, I think have accelerated my growth just as a communicator, as a collaborator, and hopefully now over the last 4 years as a manager, because I had no business being in a management role at probably 25 when I started, or 24, but hopefully have progressed in that area.
Yeah, I think that's something that you bring up. That's great. I've talked about it a few times with younger coaches. They always ask me, when do I know I'm ready, or when do I know I've found my coaching style? And my answer to that is something you brought up. It's when the players or the people around you know you as a person through how you coach, and I think the stuff with the pendulum, it's very important to go through that stuff. I think that there's a lot of, you see on Instagram now, and because everybody has such access to everybody, you don't really see people grow. You need those years where you have no idea what you're doing. Most of us started, you talked about in high school is you and another guy, and then you got an opportunity. It was you by yourself, and much like myself, I was in a program, we had one strength coach and I was a volunteer, but looking back, those are the ways you develop, because now you're able to, you learn along kind of with the other coaches. I think it's a lot harder, or you don't learn as much or have personal growth, if you will, if you're thrown into like already established programs that are already set up. Not that, for anybody listening, that there's anything wrong with that, but I think if you have those opportunities to kind of, go with places that aren't as well established, where you can kind of grow along with the program, I think that does a lot more for you, as you talked about, as you get into the latter years of coaching.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, and I'm biased because it was my come up, but the experiential learning was huge, and I think it's led me to kind of where I am now, where I'll admit I'm openly like I'm a generalist. Like I'm not a specialist in any one area. I look around me and I see people all along our staff and in other departments that know nutrition, speed, change of direction, strength, programming, periodization. They know it all better than I do. But the ability to just be in different positions and to learn from other people and to just try to grow that way and to leverage other people around you has helped me in this role immensely. And then going back to what you said about just like knowing your athletes, knowing who you are, that's outstanding. And I don't think I've ever been able to kind of quite verbalize it in that way that you just did. But that's the way that I have always felt about it is I'm just going to be myself. And I can tell you the most awkward I've ever felt as a coach or most drained mentally because I had to be somebody else was when I went back to DeLand High School to be the full-time strength coach. And of course, football was the main sport. So I would be on the sidelines with the football team. And like, I'm the get back guy. And I'm like, I've been in baseball my whole life. Like, oh, I know. And I was a pitcher too. So like, I know how to be reserved. And then every now and then a little bit of emotion, like the last out of the last inning, and you remember me, man, I'm not a rah guy. I just don't have it in me. So here I am just getting guys back and trying to hype them up. And it was exhausting, man. Like, and I hope that the kids got to know me, but that's the least I've probably ever been myself was when I was patrolling the sidelines as a strength coach there.
Yeah, I think anybody listening to take away from what he just said and from what we've been talking about the last few minutes, make sure when you start to coach, I think it's very important that you act how you feel comfortable, right? I think we get a very, a very closed or kind of pinholed situation. I mean, I always bring it up. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Draft Day. And they have the strength coach on there, and when I first saw it, I'm like, oh, good, we're going to get our day on the silver screen, and the guy comes up and he sits there and goes, guess who benched 280 pounds yesterday? Ryan Drew. Guess who squatted 400? Ryan Drew. And I'm like, this is awesome. Like, we have the one time where a strength coach is actually on film and he's talking about weights and reps and, nobody wants to be around him. So I think that's very important. If you're a rah guy, you can use that. If you're reserved, use those technical skills in that way to do that. If you're kind of out of the, I'm kind of off the wall a little bit, use those skills. But I think that's very important because like you said, you're going to end up in a situation that you don't want to be in. I have the same experience, when I was in football, great experience. But when I was there, I was like, this isn't me. This is too much kind of energy and different things. So that's how you realize. But I think the takeaway point from this is just, make sure you're comfortable with how you are. Obviously, if you're extra introverted, you're going to have to learn how to, control groups and different things like that. And you're going to have to come out of that comfort zone. I'm not saying to stay within your comfort zone, by all means. If it's going to prolong your career or make you a better coach, that's the time to kind of take an internal look at how you are and how you act. But also, I think it's very important. You want to keep yourself and kind of maintain who you are and kind of those core values.
100%. And you'll also learn, if you're in the right place, you won't have to be somebody else. And so, as you're learning as a younger coach and, you're coming up through it, sometimes being yourself, like you have to be true to your values. But a lot of times, like you have to fit within the culture, so, you might have to learn something about professionalism. You might have to learn something about the language that organization speaks. I can tell you that like, there's a way that we go about things with the Indians that are different than when I was with the Dodgers and the Mets. And that doesn't mean good or bad. It's just different. And it took me a couple of years to really figure that out and to be able to take what I thought was a really, the soft skills that I thought fit well with the organization, but it wasn't quite a round peg and a round hole. It was close. It took some years of like really shaving the edges and like learning the expectations of the organization and how to work best with these people for me to really gel. And you'll know if you're not the right fit for that culture. And the hope is that, you may have to spend some time there and you may spend time there, whether it's for financial reasons or to learn and to grow and you're early in your career, the networking, there's still so much to be had from it, even if it doesn't feel like the right fit. But you'll know it when you do have that right fit and you can't just be yourself.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. You read a lot about now, especially in today's world, about being happy, finding a job that makes you happy. And if you read a lot of deep psychology, there is no happy, right? If you search for happy constantly, you're never going to find it. But I think what you brought up is what you should define as happiness. If you're at a place where you fit in and they let you be you and you are A, respected, and B, successful, I think that's kind of the happiness that everybody talks about. And I think that kind of gets jumbled a little bit, where every day you go to work whistling and smiling and happier than everything. And I don't think that's the stride for it. I think it's more of, like you said, round hole, round peg, or almost there, and not that they accept everything that you do, but more, you're able to grow and they accept kind of those core values that you possess as a person. Obviously, as you know, when you hire people, the best thing you can do, I think, is instead of hiring a bunch of people and trying to make them like you hire people based on, that they're better at X, Y, and Z than you are. And that you can let them go do speed or power and you don't have to worry about it. And I think that's the kind of the chief of managing or being a boss in the industry.
100%. And also I think it's not bad to have conflicting viewpoints. It's not bad to have different personalities. And sometimes, like, you don't want to just pigeonhole yourself in an organization or team or group of people where everybody's the same. Like you want some diverse opinions and backgrounds and thoughts. But I think the big thing is the core values. And so, if you care about people and those people know that, and then, you start to add in, like, you take pride in what you do, attention to detail, all the other soft skills. But at the heart of it, like, if you care about people and you care about your work and people can recognize that, they'll probably, for lack of a better term, put up with any differences that you have in personality from the rest of the organization, if that makes sense. So I felt so comfortable here. I felt comfortable in past places as well, but the Indians, there's been a lot. I've had a lot of personal growth. I've gone through a lot of personal hardships while I've been here. I've been very open about a lot of that with people here, and I've never felt judged. I've never felt, any less than anybody else. And like I said, in fact, if anything, I've learned here to not be threatened by the fact that everybody else in the room is smarter than me. And even when it comes to, like, working with players, happy to defer them to somebody else who knows it better and shine the spotlight on other coaches, where I can tell you earlier in my career, even just a few years ago, I felt insecure because I didn't feel like I knew as much about anything as anyone. So it was a challenging position and really forced me to grow.
Yeah, it's very important to have conflict. And I think you bring up, it's not, you want to be you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. You want to be able to grow all the time. And I think, that conflict, you don't want it to be bad, but you do need that conflict because, as you said, that's what helps you grow. If you know somebody that knows more about a specific area, that's going to make you get better. So you need those conflicts. You need those differences, because if everybody just agrees, you're not going to grow as a whole. Yeah. So I think that's very important to have those conflicts and to be able to, but also, have everybody open to kind of hashing those out and understanding. If you have conflicts, but each person's, eager to kind of talk those things out, I think that's a great position. And something that I think you brought up in the beginning of your career, you fell out of place because you have to scream and yell, similar to me. And I think that goes across the board. A lot of places, I thought I had to be a screamer. I was a yeller. I used to punish people. I used to make people run until they vomited, because I was under the impression that you have to kind of pull the respect out of the players, and that's how, you went through the high school and college. That's kind of how it is, because you're an authority figure already, but then when you transition into the minor leagues, you realize the guys don't have to listen to you. I mean, I don't want to say that, but in reality, you can't make them run. You can't kick them off the field. They pretty much have more power than you do. So the big thing for me, and you touched on it as well, you learn that by talking to the players and getting them to understand you, and also, big thing, understanding them, you can get them to listen to you. And then trust is the biggest thing. Then they'll listen to you. And I think that kind of progresses you as a coach, and you realize you don't have to scream and yell and you're not demanding respect. You're kind of getting it from each person.
Absolutely. And I think, we are in a behavior change business.
Mm-hmm.
You can boil it down to a lot of different things, but realistically, the majority of the time, especially, I feel like kind of in my role in with the Indians, where I work in our player development complex, we get new draft picks every year. Every time we sign a new player, they get brought in. And so a lot of times there's just a lot of education. There's a lot of, onboarding them to what we do, changing lifestyles and things like that. And what it boils down to is, like, can you help them change behaviors? And sometimes you get several years down the road and you're just trying to change like 1% of a behavior. But if we're trying to do that, like, the influence that we're going to get, the respect that we're trying to get from the athlete, but ultimately so we can influence them, we have to go to their level, whatever that may be. And sometimes like it can't even come from us. It's got to be deferred out to somebody else because, if I'm not the best resource for that athlete, I have to be comfortable getting them the best resource. And sometimes that's another way to get more money in the bank, so to speak, when it comes to respect and influence, is when they know that you're going to do whatever you can to get them the right resource. And we've gone through that kind of with the Indians a little bit. Kind of, it feels like it's unique from what I've seen is a lot of times private sector versus professional baseball, the pull in the offseason, that give and take where it's always us versus them. Like, we want you doing our program. And early on when I got here, our farm director basically said, like, we don't want to tell them that they can't train somewhere, but we want to partner with them through that process. And that may mean we're pretty hands off. That might mean we call their trainer. That might mean a whole host of things. We go visit them. It might not mean anything, but they need to know that we're there in it with them, and we're there to utilize every resource that they have around them. And so all of a sudden, like, one of the barriers that used to be there is like you get to the off season and you feel like you have such good rapport with this player and you have such good momentum going with them in their development. And then they go train at XYZ facility. And now there's a little bit of tension, and it's just like, you don't want that. And so the big word for us is partnership, and whether that's off season, in season, we're partnering with the player and hopefully trying to build that relationship, that trust, respect, mutual respect, so that we can help them the best we can.
Very happy to see that's going on. I completely 100% agree, having worked in all facets and also the private sector, because one of the things that I saw over the years is you do get that divide, or one of the things from the other side that I saw was you'll go to a private sector, right? And you'll try to tell the person there, and not that they're doing anything wrong, but you'll try to explain to them that they don't do this specific exercise or movement when they go into the minor leagues, right? Case in point for me, there was a base stealing issue, and one time a kid was teaching different steps, and I went in there very gingerly because I was new at the place, and I said, look, I know what you're trying to do, right? I get it, Lee Taft, everything's great, but they don't do this when they go back to baseball. I said, so I understand your movements. I understand you're trying to, give them a full circle and teach them how to move properly. But when they go to step camp, when they begin spring training, they're not going to run like this. So you're pretty much just wasting time, and you have to make sure that there's that kind of camaraderie. And I think that's great. I think all the way through, not even in baseball, I think everywhere, that is our biggest hurdle, if you will, as strength coaches, because all the way down from ATs to doctors everywhere, there's always a divide. And for some reason, it's always about us. It's always about the doctor, and it's always about the PT, and it's always about the coach, when in reality, it's about the kid. And the only way you're going to, get respect, like you said, from the kid, and show the kid that you have respect, is say, okay, I understand you're going to go here. We can't do anything about you going to facility XYZ. But what we can do is stay in contact to make sure that their values and your values and what you're doing is kind of in line with what we're doing, and everybody's a win-win. Because at the end of the day, it's always about the athletes. It has nothing to do with you or me or the doctors or whose plan's better. It's basically, we want to, create a comprehensive program where we can all do that. And I think that's amazing that you're doing that there, and happy to see that, because I think that's a problem everywhere. In college, I dealt with it, private sector, it's always this kind of give and a take, or somebody doesn't want to give up information. Or if you go to a private sector, they want to say that they trained this guy and it's all on them, when in reality, genetics, man. As you know, if you're going to throw 97, you're going to throw 97. Doesn't matter how many weighted balls you throw or how high your box jump is.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, player-centered care. That's all it is. We put them in the center and we surround them with the resources. And then the more you can involve them in that process and help them feel like they had some agency in the process, they had some stake in building it, the more they're going to buy in. And to your point, what they're going to do when they come back to us is right, wrong, or indifferent. They need to be prepared for what they are going to be asked to do in camp. And that's the bigger piece for us. Do I care what they're doing? Certainly. Would I love to have some influence in, hey, like, I really like these are his 3 highest leverage goals. I hope that we're attacking them, and I think this might be the best way. Would I love to have some say in that? Sure. But at the end of the day, I really just want to know what he's been doing. So when he does show up, we don't throw him in the wrong running progression group. His workloads are way too high, and then he has an injury that forces him to stay back for rehab after they break from spring training, or costs him a chance at being major league depth and potentially making the major league team or something like that. So knowing what they've been doing so that you can have a smoother transition. And one of the things that came up recently on a trainer that I called on one of our guys was, he laid out everything for me. He was awesome. I mean, super transparent, and the work that he does is fantastic. But he had said something along the lines of like, he's not, he's doing this exercise as his lower body primary, and he's going to pick up trap barring as we get closer to spring because it's concentric based, and we'll do a little bit more power focus that way. And I was like, I waited to the end and I said, okay, awesome. So just for clarity, I just want to make sure I heard you right. You're going to start trap barring close to spring. He goes, oh yeah, like unless you don't want me to. I was like, no, that's great. I just want to know so that when he comes in and we run some sort of strength assessment where he might have to, do a mid-thigh pull, or he might have to do something like that, I feel really comfortable because I know he's been gripping heavy. Like, that's fantastic. But if I didn't know that, we wouldn't know where to begin with him.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we're talking about here for everybody listening is time. It's not what they're doing is wrong. It's not what we're doing doesn't mix. But as Ryan's been talking about, it's when a guy comes back from a long off season, you only have 4 weeks, 2 weeks to get him ready. And if a guy is not doing what he's supposed to, or he's been doing something completely different, and you have to administer these tests and you have to give people information on an athlete, you don't have time to go backwards. I mean, you remember you get to spring training and the pitchers are running 12 pulls right off the bat. I mean, not that you do that, but when I was, in there, they all do that. You hit the ground running. You get there, and the first day of practice kind of is like an in-season workout, so the biggest thing we're facing is time. So it's, anybody listening, it's not whether or not it's okay to do that, and they don't want them to do different things. It's they have a goal, and there's not enough time to fix a guy or to teach a guy things that he should have done in the off season before he has to break. And as Ryan brought up, if he's not ready in certain things, it could hold him back from making the ultimate dream and making the big leagues.
100%. And ultimately, guys have a lot of pressure, and this is all part of like the process. So we zoom back out, like we talk about building trust and partnering with them and getting them to buy in. And you want the communication to be really solid, because a lot of times when they come into camp, like, of course, this is their opportunity to show, hey, like I should I should leave spring training and be with an affiliate. I shouldn't stay in extended spring training, or I should be in AAA, not AA, or I should make the big leagues. So these guys have a lot of pressure to go out there and perform and show what they can do. If there was any lack of preparation coming in, if they don't trust you, or if you don't have all the intel, you could take it face value there, and they say they're prepared, and now you're just trusting their word. And so again, you hope you have really good rapport with the players, but at the same time, any kind of objectivity we can add to what they've done when they've been away from us is incredibly important, even if we're just, projecting and estimating what we think they've done. And in a lot of cases, when we, this 150 to 200 players are going to report, the majority of them, you're not going to know a lot of what they've been doing, because not many of them can come to a camp. For us, we can only have maybe 50 or so at a time in a normal off season, not a COVID year, but you could have 50 in one particular camp, and you might get another 50 in another camp. But still, we're not going to see them all or lay eyes on them for the whole off season. And this year has posed even more challenges to that.
Yeah. So the bottom line is, communication is the biggest thing, because you can't track everybody, but the biggest thing is we want to make sure everybody's prepared.
100%.
So we've been kind of touching around it. I just want you to go through what you do as a performance coach with the Indians, just kind of a, real laid out thing. We've touched about a lot of things you've done, but I just want you to go through that a little bit. What your kind of chief role is there with the Indians.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. And it's progressed a lot over the last 4 years. I've had the same title, same role for the last 4 years, but the responsibilities with that have kind of progressed the whole way. And I kind of alluded to this earlier. I was brought in at probably way too soon into a role, coordinator title. For those that aren't in baseball, that's somewhat of a management position. So, maybe a lower level management type role. And I definitely wasn't ready for it. And so when I came in, part of my role was just to be the rehab strength and conditioning coach. So it was take that on, but also, do some coordinating around the Arizona facility, which is, where we have our spring training, our rookie ball season, and then our off-season camps. And so my first 2 years, I spent a lot of time as just solely the rehab strength coach and just learning what it meant to help oversee strength and conditioning in a facility. We had less coaches in the building at that point. We only had, at that time, essentially just one other strength and conditioning coach. So I worked with him over the years, basically by year 3 or so, or late 2, early 3, we brought on another full-time strength and conditioning coach to be the rehab strength coach. I transitioned to just 40-man in major league rehabs while I was continuing to take on more responsibility from an administrative standpoint. And then fast forward to the end of year 3 through year 4, where I'm not really tasked with any specific players, just there to support our coaches as they support our athletes. So a lot of it, goal setting for our athletes, collaborating across departments. I don't oversee nutrition, mental performance, athletic training, or physical therapy or anything like that, but I spend the majority of my day working with the leaders of those departments, as well as the, what we call our fundamental coaches, but the baseball coaches, all those departments, to try to lay the plans out. So scheduling, goal setting, ensuring assessments get done, facility upkeep, a lot more administrative stuff going on. And then one of the bigger pieces in the last couple of years is we wanted to move towards utilizing sports science more. So about 2 years ago, took on a little bit of more understanding of that. And so help provide some of the periodization that we use with our running progressions and kind of with our skill work. So we have an assistant director for player development. So an assistant farm director. He's essentially our director of performance, if you will, overseeing all of those physical departments I touched on earlier. And so kind of working to assist him with some of those, the bigger items for planning, periodization, goal setting.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, a lot of kind of managerial stuff, but still get to do all of it. But it's great. You get to do a lot of different facets. What are some of the philosophies and things that you guys use in terms of, in training and things like that? What are like the main goals that you want to kind of relate to your players and also see your players, transition on the field with the organization?
Yeah, so I think some of like the kind of bigger rocks or the bigger pillars of it all. I mean, the first thing, man, and you know this from spending a long time in this field, is like you go to just about any weight room, and if they're doing anything halfway decent, you're going to ask them, hey, like, what's your philosophy? And they're going to probably outline the same things, right? Like, we want movement quality, we want to build, a solid base of strength on top of that, and then turn that into sport specific qualities. Like, and that's what we're after. I would say some like kind of tenets that we kind of live by in our department from an S&C standpoint. We want to build a total athlete, so we don't necessarily just think of them as baseball players. And for those that are not in the game of baseball or been in baseball, you could bring in an athlete for the first time as in our case, a Cleveland Indian at as early as 16 years old. A lot of them come in between 18 and 22, but our international signing periods allow us to bring them in at 16. So you'll have those players traditionally for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, maybe even 9 years before they ever make the big leagues, if they ever make it there. So we try to have this longer term vision of just building the overall athlete and then working with our skill departments to hone in on what's the highest leverage thing on the baseball field that they need to address. And is there something physically that's high leverage that we can work for? So there's a lot of individualization that goes into that, but ultimately the template is, squat, lunge, hinge, push, pull, brace, rotate, all those things. And then we take it to we use our assessments to try to guide how we get a little bit more specific for each player. I would say that's kind of our overarching, themes. And then between myself, I kind of failed to mention this. So in terms of just strength and conditioning as a whole, we have 3 S&C coordinators essentially. So myself being the performance coordinator in Arizona, we have a performance coordinator in the Dominican, and then we have an affiliate level performance coordinator who's essentially functions more as like the traditional strength and conditioning coordinator, really guides the programming and things like that. So it's kind of building off of a long history of the Indians really having a player development focus way before I ever got here. As we've built upon that, Chris Giacchino is our affiliate level coordinator. He's brought from the college setting and all of his experiences, some really great just total athlete development. So those are kind of the things we look to build. And then on the field, just looking to build, I would call it sport specific, capacities. So just the ability to tolerate workloads that they're going to see in the game, whether that's from rotation, sprinting, and things like that.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Yeah. So pretty much, we use all the same potatoes and the chips, but it's all coordinated a little bit different. I just want to ask something you touched on. So do you guys with kids you see, international kids from the DR, Venezuela, things like that, if you're going to have a kid for up to 9 years, is their training different in terms of like, you put them on a longer strategic plan as opposed to somebody you get like, and then that a high school player or somebody you get as a junior out of college, let's say? Is there difference in like timeline programming with you guys?
Definitely, yeah, and it's built out over the years, and almost I should say this just up front. Everything that I'm outlining, since I've been here, everything is developing as we go. So 4 years ago, it wasn't as good as it is now, and I would hope even next year it's better than it is right now. But it's really awesome. We have a guy named Hassani Torres. He's our Dominican Academy performance coordinator. Excuse me, and he worked at the affiliate levels in the States, but has transitioned into that role. And basically his role just mirrors mine down there. And so between my experience at the high school setting, working with the young athletes we bring in, stateside, at 18 to 22 years old when we onboard them. And then his experience now working with younger athletes when they bring in our J2 athletes, as we call them, if you're familiar, but are the guys that we sign on July 2nd of their age 16 year. When they come in, he spent the last 2 years essentially building out this curriculum for them. And that goes not just strength, but movement, education. It all comes together, and all the departments work together to start at the very basics for those kids. It's incredible the shape that they come in now. By the time they're 17, 18, 19 years old, when they transition over to us, it's unbelievable. And I can only imagine what the game is going to look like when as more teams, and I'm sure they all are doing something very similar. And all of a sudden you sign a guy at 16 and he makes it to the big leagues at 22, 23. What he looks like when he's 25 to 28 years old, I don't know what this game's going to look like then when we start to see those fruits kind of actually come to be harvested.
Yeah, no, I think it's amazing, the changes that are made, and, people listening, we'll touch on it a little bit, but if you want to get into this field, the reason why everybody always says to study and to know what you're doing, but make sure you're dynamic, right? And we talked about not being the smartest person in the room. It's because it's constantly changing. We've been talking for a little while, and Ryan's brought up a lot. It changes all the time, right? 4 years ago, it was different. 2 years ago, it was different. A year ago, it was different, and it's ever changing, and it's going to constantly evolve. And I think it's going to do that, forever. I think we're going to see 110 off the mound at some point. But that is the thing. It's ever evolving. So, when you're trying to break into this, it is very important to be open-minded, because not necessarily you're going to use all this stuff, but everything changes so rapidly. It's literally off season to off season. One off season starts, there's a plan, they go through the season, and second, those short season teams end, there's another philosophy, something else that's going to go in place, or something that's added to those kind of core values we talked about.
Yeah, certainly. And even from a career standpoint, there's so much that I didn't know, and so much I didn't know. I didn't know. I didn't know what a high performance model. I had no idea what it meant to be a high performance team. So when I was coming through, just to be honest, when I came through strength and conditioning, after a few years of it, I kind of realized I didn't want to be a major league strength coach. And that's why I kind of bounced in and out of baseball, because that goal that pushes us all from a career standpoint, outside of just, yes, we want to help our athletes and we want the teams to win, but that personal bit that kind of keeps you up a little bit later at night and gets you reading early in the morning. And
that's why you go to the minors. Yep. 100%.
Yeah. So I was like, I don't know what I want to do. So come back and as the game has evolved from 2015, when I first got into pro baseball, and now 2021, with where I'm at now, and you're seeing high performance and sports science, all of a sudden I, for the first time about 2 years ago, figured out what my goals are. And because I didn't even know certain positions and certain things in this field existed. So the game's going to, not only develop in the sense of what the content knowledge you need to help your athletes, but also just your track as a coach doesn't have to necessarily be, I want to be an NFL strength coach, so I'm going to start at Division III football and work my way up. It doesn't have to be, I'm in rookie ball and I'm trying to get to the big leagues. It can be. That's awesome. It just doesn't have to be anymore, which is really exciting about the whole field.
Yeah, I think that's great. That happened. That kind of happened right after I kind of exited baseball, because, same thing. I had wonderful experiences, but when I first got hired, it was being a big league strength coach. That was the goal of everybody that came in there. And, years past now, they're evolving. There's different roles. There's more areas to kind of be yourself. You don't need to be an on the field guy who is in charge of organization, gaining trust and kind of mediating everything between the coordinator and where you are in Iowa or wherever your team is. So it's great to see that change. And I think that's amazing because, like I said, we touched on it early on. You got into this because you wanted to be a head guy. You wanted to be on ESPN. You wanted to be a head guy. And there was only one way through that. You start at the bottom, there was six guys in front of you, and there was no way around it. Now, what Ryan touched on is there's ways to kind of either go around it or kind of find something that better fits you. It's not so much these are the six guys, and until you hop over the five guys in front of you, you're not going to be at that upper echelon level that you want to.
100%. And then it just opens up more windows for people. So again, when I'm walking around going, man, I just don't feel comfortable as a upbeat, energetic strength coach. Like all of a sudden I look back and I go, man, like I remember being a high school sophomore, junior, and in summer league games, if I wasn't pitching and like we were in between games, I was reading a book about pitching mechanics and I got made fun of for it, but I look back at it, it's like, oh, well, now I know I've been able to leverage that into a lot of, what I love to do about, what I love about this field right now. I used to love logging every single weight I lifted, every single thing I ate, drank, whatever, in like a little, notebook when I was in high school. And I now realize that I love the math side of all this. So the workload management and monitoring is fascinating to me, but I didn't know it existed a few, 4 or 5 years ago, or I didn't know it was available to me. It looked like something that was so far away.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. You're able to kind of use those skills. And, I've touched on this before. I feel like, whatever you're really meant to be, we talked about happiness, will find you because it's a combination of the things you like to do. You're able to take a skill, whether it be strength and conditioning, whether it be finance or whatever it is. And, those things that you did as a child or the preparation, we can bring up the thing we bought before. Those things are kind of the cornerstones of the middle of what you're doing. And then you're able to kind of progress on that. So I think that's a big trait. If you're into certain things, especially younger ages, don't give any of them up, especially if they really excite you, because if you keep pushing and keep kind of testing out your avenues, eventually you'll be able to find something where, that one thing that you like to do, like you said, analyzing pitch mechanics, doing the math, counting different things, that is, eventually you'll be able to do that. I did the same thing. I was real big. I just carry a weight, notebook around and track all my stuff. And I would stay up at night writing out workouts, and I'd be like, oh, this is great. And all your friends are like, oh, this is what we're doing. It's in Muscle and Fitness, so there is already kind of a difference. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you.
We've been talking about it and different things. What are some of the biggest issues, in your opinion, with minor league baseball? And if you want to touch on the other settings you've been in that kind of need to be fixed, I mean, I know it's ever evolving, but what would you say are kind of the main issues that you'd like to see fixed in the future?
Yeah, loaded question, but a good one. So
got to have some loaded questions.
No, I think this, honestly, and this isn't just a cop out, I do think it can be extrapolated to kind of the industry, especially in the States, and just the state of like our society, right? Information's everywhere, and it's information without context, and it's scary how fast people can get that information. And some teams and organizations are going to still be super siloed off. Like there may not be these conversations between departments. There may not be a lot of idea sharing. Conflict might be avoided. So that's kind of one end of the spectrum. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you have environments, I think, like us, where we're somewhere in the middle. But as you take what we're doing and keep going further, is we pride ourselves on collaboration and teaming and doing these things where, our weight room doors, the office doors, is open to literally anybody. If a pitching coach wants to come in and sit and ask any question or wants to kick around an idea, we'll do it. The big thing though is when you start to collaborate and you start to let more people in, with the access that there is to information right now, ideas are oftentimes thrown around without any context, if that makes sense. And I think Twitter's like the perfect example of this. The things at this point that get the most retweets typically are the really cool and different exercises. And at the end of the day, no matter who is posting that, I can guarantee you a lot of those guys, and I would hope you'd agree, probably still have those same potatoes you talked about earlier. That fancy way of doing the RDL with this kind of contraption is just a piece of their program that they may not even prescribe to every athlete, maybe only just a select number of athletes, and maybe their most elite or their most specialized cases. So I think with information that's out there everywhere, and then you add into baseball the fact that baseball has realized that they're behind other sports in terms of performance training. especially the rest of the world. We've realized that we're pretty far behind. So you're seeing influences from, Great Britain, Europe, the rest of Europe, Australia come over, which is awesome. And the thing is, when you implement those things, is it with the full context? Is it something that's doable and scalable in professional baseball? Because one of our biggest challenges is just so big. And I happen to be talking to another performance coordinator with another organization recently who just talked about how he came from a setting where they had just a handful of athletes, and they're trying to now apply those things to something as massive as an organization that has over 200 athletes, over 15 to 20, CSCSs, multiple departments across literally the world, really, because you're talking about athletes that might go home to Japan or Taiwan. You have academies in Venezuela, Mexico, the Dominican. So how do you take all this information, all these great ideas, and all this innovation that we're looking to have in baseball, and how do you add the context and make it scalable so that it fits in baseball? And I definitely don't have any of the answers to that, but that's just things that I'm, as we're watching teams, it's those that don't just have the what, because that's not the innovation anymore. It really was never the innovation. If you bring in GPS monitoring, well, there's another sport that's been doing it much longer. It's not just strapping those on people's backs. It's the how. How are you going to apply it effectively within our setting and utilize that in a game that's never had these types of things?
Yeah, amazing answer. I completely agree, not even just from the strength conditioning and the baseball standpoint, but in general, social media, information is amazing. And, I always think it's a good and a take, it's an angel and a devil, because the information is there. So at the drop of a hat, you can go see an RDL. You can go see 700 variations if you have an hour and a YouTube account. But like you said, context needs to be there. And that is why I think what I've noticed, especially in younger generations, is that they don't want to know the backstory. They don't want to know how this person got to do an RDL, let's just say on a stability ball. Let's get crazy. Now, for everybody knowing, as a disclaimer, I would never do that. And I'm sure Ryan would never prescribe that to any of the athletes doing an RDL on a stability ball. But let's just say somebody does that. Now, that's great for that person, but somebody sees that, and then it's, well, why don't we do that? And there's no explanations. I personally, with Instagram, the following is great, but I like the ones, I like the guys with the long comments at the bottom that take the time, number 1 through 6, and thoroughly explain everything. So I think that's, something to bring up, is the information is out there. Yes. And you can get all the information you need. You can literally go on YouTube and, you can become, an expert in a field. But I also think you have to do due diligence, because like Ryan said, all the guys out there that light themselves on fire and do deadlifts, they still use those potatoes, and they still use those potatoes to get to that. And, interesting enough, just a little side note, I saw a thing on Netflix about influencers, and there's a guy who, I don't know if you've ever seen him, he did deadlifts in roller skates, and he deadlifted like 500 pounds, and he's a nut job. But when you watch the documentary, it's like 10 minutes long. He has like a master's in exercise science, and he's a very book savvy person, but he identified that that's what he needed to do to get a large following on Instagram. So he just does, those things. So yeah, like I said, so I think that's it. And the last thing before we move on is, what everybody should understand is, I could give you a full program and Ryan can give you a full program. You're not going to understand that. And what you see on Instagram are just snippets. There's no telling when they use it. There's no injury history. There is nothing about the athlete. So, you don't know when to put that in, because you'll see it all the time. And I hear it all the time. And it's what you talked about, that what, right? If you go to a conference, generally with a lot of coaches that aren't CSCS or really high up in that, a guy will bring up an exercise on the stage, and the question is, when do I do this? What do I need to do it? How many reps? And in my head, not that that's bad, that just comes from a place of misinformation, but I'm like, they just want to take the 6 exercises that you went over at a conference and throw them into have their pitchers do it. And I think that's one of the problems. I think that, when you put out a program in a book from somebody who's up there, your Cressies and things like that, they could give you all their stuff. You still wouldn't be able to coach like them, because they know the backgrounds, they know the next step. And I think the biggest art of coaching is that you're able to change things on the fly based on the individual, but you only know how to change those things. And I think you're the best when you're in a situation where you can change on the fly. And that's what separates you as a coach. It's not what you write down on your Excel spreadsheet. It's what you're able to do when a kid comes in with a problem. Hey, I woke up this morning and my shoulder's sore. I'm supposed to do this stuff. I want to stay on task, but what can we do? That's what makes you a coach, not what you have written down. So I think that's a great point that you bring up. And I think that, again, social media is great, but context is the biggest important word from that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just one example of this, because it just came to mind. So I'm sure people can think of who maybe I'm referencing, but I'm going to try to keep it super general. When on social media within the last year or so, one of the best offensive players in the NFL had a video that went viral from ESPN. I don't even remember fully, but they were like, it was something along the lines of like juggling balls while on a stability ball, while I mean, it was something outrageous, right? And they got blown up for that by everybody and their brother in our field. And so set that aside. Now, I love to mountain bike. It's just kind of like my hobby that I picked up out here in Arizona. I love to bike. Well, there's several mountain bikers. I hope I don't alienate the mountain bike community, but there's certain mountain bikers, professionals, I mean, elite, the top of their field, that I've seen doing just similar things. Like they post videos of it. Now, those same people, they deadlift, they squat, they do pull-ups, all that stuff, and they train their butts off on the bike to be the athletes they are. But similar thing, like one leg on a balance ball moving, like a water bag or something, or an aqua bag. And you're just like, man, what are they doing? But in reading more and talking to some other people who kind of understand their thinking and that have coached athletes like that, Olympic athletes, and, from different disciplines that are like that, there's a big engagement factor. Those are sports that don't traditionally like to train, or those athletes may not like to train. But if you give them a technical challenge that involves the brain and coordination, all of a sudden it resembles somewhat their sport. So they're just feeding in this challenge of like, hey, I need you in a high plank position. And now you're going to balance a ball on your head, and then you're going to roll over and catch it in your teeth, like all that stuff that I'm completely making up. But the fact is, when I know the context for those athletes, it makes a heck of a lot more sense of why that's included. And the athlete just really likes to post that because most people can't do those things. I don't know the context behind that NFL player, but there may be something substantial behind it, but we don't know because we don't have all the information. Now, there are some like bad things out there, but we just don't have all of the information to make those judgments.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the overwhelming thing with what you said and what we've been talking about is, I don't think, I've been asked before, what's the best exercise for this? What shouldn't you do? Personally, and I think you'd agree, there is no bad exercises, right? Because there is a context, right? Standing on a stability ball and juggling a dumbbell might be weird, but if I've seen the videos, I'll put up his Instagram when we start the podcast. You can watch him ripping down those double black diamond hills. But when you're on there, right, I'm sure there's a fear factor, right? If you go left when you're not supposed to, or you go right, there's a little bit of some bad stuff is going to happen. So I think the biggest thing is context. The biggest thing, understand what the person's doing. And I said, you can do whatever you want. I don't care what the exercise look like. If you can explain it to me in a way that I can understand and say, look, I know it's not for X, Y, and Z, but it's good for surfers, I'm going to listen to you, and that's why I also think with social media, we'll talk about it before, one of the negatives is people like to bash movements and exercises where instead of asking somebody, now if I ask you and you say, well, I saw it on TV or I have no idea, then we can get into something else. But I think it's very important if you pick movements and you have a justified reason and why you're doing those, and you have a little bit of science in there and it's kind of proven to help if you've used it with some people, I don't think there's even, I don't think there's a wrong exercise, but again, the context.
For sure. And I just had this conversation with a brilliant coworker, of mine. And we just talked about sometimes.
Thank you for watching. Please remember to subscribe and follow us on Instagram for all the latest updates on the podcast.
The silver bullet for fixing skill issues. We'll do something in the weight room and that'll fix it. And sometimes, the weight room helps, but at the same time, it's not. No one exercise or implement or device should be the basis for whatever you're trying to accomplish. It's the principles behind it. And your principles might be, yes, I feel like if I use these crazy methods, I'm going to get the result I'm looking for. Well, that's great because it meets your principles. But if you're just snipering exercises, or you're saying I won't use those exercises ever just because I don't, well, then you're probably leaving a lot of progress and adaptation on the table. And that was something that I meant to touch on earlier, just talking about like what we do as an organization from themes and philosophy. And one of the big things that is important to us is we don't take any tools out of the toolbox. Nearly every exercise is available, but it's about helping coaches and the athletes understand why certain exercises are the best for them. But we're not going to say, oh, we don't front squat because we don't want to do it, or we just don't want our athletes to do it. we keep that as a tool that's available for them. And that might be the best exercise for several athletes.
Yeah, I think that's a great something to write down if you're listening. Don't take any tools out of toolbox. I don't think you could have put it in a better way. Everybody talks about adding all the time. I think it's important. As a strength coach, and everything that I think it encompasses what we've talked about. You're constantly trying to add to that toolbox. You're open to receiving new tools, but you never want to take anything out, and I think that's extremely important because it's ever evolving and you never know what is going to help somebody, and you want to have as many tools as you can, under, those circumstances. So for anybody out there, Ryan, that wants to get into the field, fresh out of, maybe high school or something, what or some advice you would give them going into it from your experience?
Yeah. So I think I said this earlier. I'm a little biased. My progression worked for me, so I'm going to give some biased advice. But one of the big things I would say first and foremost is I would say that don't let your school education, the formal education, be the only thing you're doing to get better. So self-study is going to be huge for you because the courses you take in exercise science, some of it is applicable, but a lot of it may not be applicable 10 years from now, or it may not be applicable in a team sports setting. The fact is you should be looking for others in the field that are successful, that are making an impact, and try to learn from them, whether that's the content that they put out. And thankfully, most people do put out some sort of content at this point, which is really awesome, or just trying to get in touch with them. And then the second part of that is trying to apply what you learn and just get some experiential learning in. So again, biased because I started coaching at 18 and I felt like it helped me determine who I was as a coach. I treated that high school team, that high school baseball team that I volunteered for, like they were my Cleveland Indians back then. And I probably took it way too serious. I do remember, friends of my, or my parents of my friends, from high school when they saw me at like 19, oh, you're helping the baseball team. That's cool. And it felt so condescending, but I was like, yeah, no, helping. I'm working 40, 50 hours a week. And thankfully I was able to do that for free and was able to have a family that supported me. So I was very fortunate. But I think anytime that you can get any sort of experience coaching, first observing, but then second, get your hands dirty. If that means you just run a warm up for the local high school tennis
please
team,
remember to subscribe and follow us on Instagram for all the latest updates on the
19,
podcast.
2021, when really that doesn't have to be the thing that puts money on, puts food on the table for you and puts money in the bank. It's massive, and you'll have the opportunity to learn as you go along. And then if you're searching for good content, if you're searching to learn from people, the networking will be another piece of it, right? So you're going out there and you're just trying to connect with people. And even if they never email you back, if you send out 50 emails and you get one back, that might be the one that counts. And we don't have time to go into some of my stories, but I can 100% attribute my start in professional baseball as a intern to somebody I reached out to when I was coaching travel baseball, who was a minor league strength coach. And I emailed him, and he, long story short, worked for the Dodgers a few years earlier, made a call for me and helped me get the interview. And so I could, all along the way, the networking that I've done as well, I feel like has paid dividends too.
Awesome advice. I appreciate that. For anybody listening, I will second that. The experience, it cannot be replaced by a book. There is no limit to how many athletes you should try to get in front of, because you're going to encounter every type. And just when you think you have them all figured out, you're going to get another one that you have no idea how they run and how their brain works. So the more experience, the more exposure, as he talked about, that you can get to, the better you're going to be. And I think, the age thing is great too. I use it too while you're in college, while you're in high school, while you don't have responsibilities. Get out there and use that time as much as possible to volunteer and to kind of hone your skills, because when you graduate, at 24 or 22, whatever, you're not going to get paid. Let's be honest. I've talked about it lots of times. You're not going to go out there and somebody's going to hand you $70,000 to be the strength coach for the Jets. The one of the lingering things with the field is you need experience, and so the best time to do that, as Ryan said, is when we're 17, 18, 19, if you have the opportunity. But another thing, a great thing is if you have to work, if you don't have the abilities to do that, go and do a travel team at night for an hour twice a week or something, but something to push yourself. And as you said, don't rely on those books. You want the books, you want that as a cornerstone, but always want to be growing. And I don't think anything takes part of the experience. Me personally, I appreciate the anatomy background, but I think if I would have got in a weight room at 17, it would have helped a little bit more than taking the anatomy classes. Not that they didn't help me. Don't want to get colleges mad at me, but I think that experience and that second part, just to touch on real quick, networking is giant. Much like Ryan, I ended up on the Mets because somebody I went to college with knew somebody else, and I ended up in the organization. So you never know who you're going to meet, and you never know what that person's going to be able to do for you down the line. Not to say everybody you meet, you don't want to use them for something, but just make sure you kind of keep tabs on those people, and always be open to new experiences.
Yeah, 100%. And it's not, I think you touched on something really important. Not everybody is going to have the means to do maybe what I did when I was in college. I had parents that supported me and were able to do that. And it was tremendous. Without them, I wouldn't have gotten those opportunities to coach for free as many hours as I did. But that will be a part of your life that looking back on, and I feel like it feels forever ago. I guess it really wasn't that long ago, but for me, you can lose a little bit of sleep to put more money in the bank, so to speak, in terms of learning more, coaching more. That's a time where, you know what, so many people go out and will party and stay up all night. Spend that time. If you got to work shifts to pay for your tuition and pay for education, totally understand that. Stay up and read a little bit, an extra hour every night. Go coach, like you said, that travel team on Saturday morning when you're exhausted. Do the little things, because once you get to the real world, unfortunately, those become a lot harder. And then you hope to get to a point where, I know me personally, I'm coming up on 30, and work-life balance matters to me at this point. So, but at 18 to 22, it didn't. All that mattered was going and getting it.
Exactly. Yep. While you have the energy, right? Burn it at both ends. Because right after you hit that 30 line, you're kind of like, I should probably sleep for 9 hours. I should do X, Y, and Z. But yeah, no, I think, what he said was fantastic. Be able to, get those experiences, and I think those are the most important things. So Ryan, what's next for you in the future? I know we have COVID, but let's just say if that wasn't a thing, to kind of move around, what would you like to see in your career and with the Indians?
Yeah. So first of all, with the Indians specifically, I want us to win a World Series. Like, that's our mission. And we do that every single day as we're trying to develop players to help the big league team win a World Series. And that is what we live for every single day. I've never won a championship in my entire life in anything, not T-ball, not little league, nothing. I've never won one. And I would have died in high school. I would have sat on the bowling team if it meant that I had a chance to be a part of a winning team. So I would do anything to help the Cleveland Indians win a World Series and have just a small piece of that. That said, like, personally, career-wise, noted this earlier, just didn't know what I wanted to do. Even when I took this job out here and I came out here with the Indians, it was an offer or an opportunity that I just couldn't turn down. But it was really reluctant to take it. And it was tough because I just didn't know what I was getting myself back into. I didn't want to go be a big league strength coach. Got here and feel like over the course of a couple of years, my first years, I realized that there's some avenues that I wanted to pursue. And for me, that's to become a director of performance. And so whether that's hopefully here with the Cleveland Indians at some point, where for us, the next, I guess, step would be like assistant director or assistant farm director, but you would oversee strength and conditioning, mental performance, nutrition, and have a hand in the medical department somewhat as well. And so we have somebody operating that role who's a mentor to me. So I'm in no rush at this point, but the opportunity to take on this leadership and management that I've kind of worked on the last 4 years and be able to expand that across department lines and be able to take on a lot of different areas. Because again, I feel like I'm a generalist. I don't know any of those areas very well, but I hope that I can understand how to leverage people and connect people and relate to them and kind of take all these resources for our athletes and direct them in the direction that they need to be for those athletes. So that's ultimately kind of what I'm chasing after, what kind of keeps me pushing after hours. But at the same time, I know, having come into this role and naively thought that I was probably ready for promotions way too soon when I first got here, and having not even had a clue that some of the things that we're doing existed when I was at my previous job, I know that I probably have a long way to go. So I'm pretty patient.
Yeah. Well, awesome, man. Hopefully see the Indians in the in the World Series soon. Ryan, for anybody that wants to get a hold of you, that listens to the podcast, ask you questions, get some advice, where is the best place to contact you?
Yeah, so I would say probably two good avenues. One is Twitter. I'm probably most active on there of all the social media. I'm really bad on like Instagram and some of the other platforms, Facebook, of getting back to people. But if you get me on Twitter, there's a good chance I might see it. So my handle is at my first name Ryan _ my last name Fair, which is FAER. And then email, simple email. And so my personal email is Ryan, RYANJ, for my middle name, Fair, FAER @gmail.com. I do my best. I stay super busy, and I'll be the first to tell you. I tell anybody that reaches out to me, or that I give my contact info, even my phone number, that I'm probably going to miss the first text. Be persistent, text me again. I just needed to come back up to the top of my notifications. So if I don't get back to you, please be persistent. I love to talk shop, share notes, and learn from other people.
Yeah. And with the Instagram, I'll put that handle when I promote the podcast. And just so everybody out there knows, act quickly, because once about February 15th happens, you're not going to get a hold of them till about October. So, if you want to get your questions in, get them in now.
Yeah, you know the game, man. That's
Exactly.
how it'll be.
Exactly. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it, man. I love chopping it up and having this conversation, and I really appreciate you being on.
Joe, thank you. And I love all the success you're having, man. I really appreciated this.
Thank you. Thank you for watching. Please remember to subscribe and follow us on Instagram for all the latest updates on the podcast.